Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for joining us. This is our fourth and final session of the Young Women in Ocean Tech speaker series. We're really glad to have you here. It's such an excellent opportunity for you all to learn more about the ocean tech industry and get hands-on with design thinking workshops as well. The best part is that this is actually a fully women-run initiative, just to show you what talent exists all around us and what jobs are out there for you right in your own communities. This project wouldn't be possible without our great funders and partners, Center for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship, everyone knows them as COVE, of course, the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development of Nova Scotia, Ignite, Dalhousie University's Amera Idea Hub, and Deep Sense, with additional support from IBM Canada and Engineers Nova Scotia. My name is Kia Jade Bonner, and I'm the Industry Project Manager at Ignite. And I'm also joined here today by Tristan Mabey, who's our Youth Program Coordinator at Ignite as well. And we're going to be running the speaker series today. For our session today, we are also joined by Olivia Pisano. She's a Ph.D. candidate in biology at Dalhousie University. Unfortunately, Marie McCormick from CTAC is unable to join us today, but we are so excited to hear Olivia talk about her experience in researching whale conservation. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. After the presentation, we're going to have about 10-20 minutes for a Q&A period. So please ask your questions through chat and we will moderate anonymously, unless, of course, you'd like to ask it. The session is going to be uploaded to YouTube, but your names and your pictures will not be included. We ask that everyone stays on mute during the presentation. And don't forget, this Saturday is our final workshop of the program. So be sure to tune in and you'll receive an email after this session with all the details about that event. So without further ado, take it away, Olivia.
Awesome. I'm just gonna share my screen here with everyone. Perfect. You should all be able to see that. So hi, everyone. My name is Olivia, and as Kia Jade mentioned, I'm a PhD student at Dalhousie. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the kind of ocean tech that we use for whale research and whale conservation, and then also a little bit about what I'm doing personally for my work. And I know you've had a lot of talks from others about the industry, and so today I'm going to be talking to you more from a scientific perspective. So I hope that's interesting for you all. So just to get started, I just want to give you a little bit of info about me and who I am and the journey that I've had so far. And so I was one of those kids that was always obsessed with whales growing up. I always knew that I wanted to be a marine biologist. And that's what led me to come here to Dal and to Halifax. And so I started a bachelor's in marine biology at Dal. And then in my second year, I was looking for a part-time job. And it just so happened that Apple was opening up a store here. And so even though I had no experience in technology or retail, I decided to apply and surprisingly got in. And so I started working at Apple and I started to get more familiar with technology and how that can be used to help people and just help wildlife in a variety of situations. And I worked for Apple throughout my honors, throughout my bachelor's degree and throughout my master's, so for 6 years total. But my honors work and my master's work actually had nothing to do with whales. My honors work was on tide pool communities. So I looked at microscopic little crustaceans through a microscope and looked at how different temperatures and different levels of nutrients affected their community structure. And then for my master's, I looked at baby brook trout and how fluctuations in temperature affected their growth and their survival. And when it came time to do my PhD, my supervisor sat down and he told me, if you could do anything, if you could study anything, what would you do? And of course, it was whales. It was always whales. So I said, I have to do something with whales. And so I started doing a little bit of research and came across a paper that looked at whales from satellites. And I just said, this is it. I got to find a way to do something about this for my PhD. And so I'll talk to you guys about that a little bit later, but it just goes to show that this journey was all over the place. But we started and now we're ending with whales. So it's all good. So I just want to start just by giving you a little bit of an idea of why it's important for us to be monitoring marine mammals, including whales. So if we think about marine mammals altogether, so that includes whales, but also dolphins and seals and dugongs and all kinds, about 98% of them are at some level of risk in over half of the world's oceans. And most of this risk is in coastal areas. And they're faced by a lot of major threats. We have climate change, we have fisheries activities. So this could be them getting caught in fishing equipment or not having enough prey because of overfishing. It can be exploitation. So some of them are still being caught for food and for bait in fisheries. We have industrial development. So this could be increases in vessel activity on the water or building of infrastructure in coastal areas. And then also pollution. So we have noise pollution, plastics, chemicals, and pathogens. So there's all kinds of things that marine mammals have to deal with. So of course, we want to make sure that we keep a close eye on them. But it's actually very difficult to monitor marine mammals. And it's even more difficult to assess when something is happening in their population. So we can't always tell right away if they're in trouble or if there's something that we need to do. And so the way that we currently survey marine mammals, or the traditional ways that we do this, are through land, ship, and aerial surveys. So an example of aerial is a plane survey, for example. So this is the standard way that we do this. We've been doing this for a very long time, and this is how we've got the majority of the data that we have on whales. But there are a few challenges with these methods. The first is that it's very expensive. It's very expensive to get all of the equipment, the personnel, and the gas, and all of that together, especially when you want to do a lot of surveys or surveys over a large area. It's also very time consuming. So it takes hours for these surveys to happen, and then somebody has to sit down and then go through all of that data and analyze it. It's very difficult to coordinate. So you have to figure out where you want to do them, how frequently, you got to get everybody together, and then what happens if there's a weather delay. So there's a lot of logistics, and it's often just inefficient if you have an animal that travels very large distances or just has a large habitat. It's just logistically impossible to be able to survey an animal in any place that it could be at all times. And so more and more we've been looking at different ocean technologies to try to complement what we're doing already. And so today I'm going to give you a brief intro to some of the ocean technology that we use for whales. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. There's a lot more that exists out there, but this is just what I'm going to touch on today. And I do want to mention as well that these technologies, there's not one that's better than the other. They're not meant to replace the traditional methods that we have so far. They all have their pros and cons. And so this is just really technology that we use to complement what we're already doing to get a better picture of what's happening for whales. And so the first technology I'm going to talk about is passive acoustic monitoring, otherwise known as PAM. So this has become increasingly popular in recent decades. It's actually a very, very active area of research. So there are a lot of people that are using PAM for whales. And you get data from both stationary and mobile platforms. So you have moored buoys and cabled hydrophones that are in one place. But then you also have things like gliders and autonomous vehicles and surface drifters that move around. So you're able to get a kind of more dynamic data. And they've been shown to be a very effective way to survey whales. And they've given us a lot of very important data on how whales use certain habitats and how they move from place to place. And this has been done for many different whale species as well as other marine mammals. And this technology has several benefits over traditional survey methods. They can monitor continuously for extended periods of time. So they're listening literally 24/7, sometimes for months, sometimes for even years. They're also non-intrusive, so they're not hurting the whale, they're not affecting the whale at all, it doesn't bother them, which is always a good thing. They're not limited by poor weather or visibility, so there could literally be a storm raging on up above and it literally doesn't matter, it will keep listening and it will not affect them at all, versus these are the kinds of things that would definitely prevent us from being able to do visual surveys. And it can also provide near real-time estimates of where whales are. And this is very important because we're finding more and more that if we want to be able to truly protect species from all the different threats that they face, we need to know where these whales are in near real time. So where are they today? Where were they 2 hours ago versus where were they a week ago? So a really cool application of this is Slocum Glider. So this is a cool video. This is a glider that's outfitted with acoustic monitoring equipment, and it glides up and down in the water column, listening for whales. And it comes up every couple of hours to report back to a server and upload all of its data. And so with these gliders, we can literally know, pardon me, we can literally know within a few hours whether or not there is a whale there. So these gliders were actually used in the Gulf of St. Lawrence last year to listen for right whales, and they were used to help implement dynamic fishery closures and also vessel restrictions. So traditionally, this is something that was only done through plane surveys. So there had to be a plane up in the air that detected a right whale in order for these things to happen. But now we have a glider that's there 24/7 that can make sure that we have these restrictions come into place more quickly so that we can better protect them against vessel strikes and also from entanglement in fishing gear. So this is also happening again this year, and it's becoming a really, really powerful tool, especially for right whale conservation. And we're going to be talking a lot about right whales in this talk. So the next technology is drones, and drones are also becoming more and more popular. They have a variety of different uses. They've been used for a lot of cool things. You can do body condition assessments. You can look at population densities. You can do photo ID with them. And you can also collect blow samples. So you can put little petri dishes on the drones and fly them over the whales and collect blow. And with that, you can do hormone analyses and all kinds of really cool things. This technology also has lots of other benefits. It's not nearly as noisy, first off, as planes or helicopters that might fly ahead. So anything that reduces our impact on the whales is always a good thing. It's also much more cost efficient than a plane survey. It's very affordable and also more accessible to researchers. It's also safer. So I think we all tend to forget that there are actually risks, human risks involved when you're doing manned flights. So when you're having someone literally fly a plane, there have been situations where survey flights have crashed and people have lost their lives. And so anything that prevents that human risk is always a good thing. And all of this, of course, allows for just more frequent data collection. So we can get more data more frequently, bigger data sets. And there's some really cool examples with what drones have been able to show us and tell us about whales. And I want to show you two of them today because I just think they're super, super cool. So the first one is, this is a study that looked at body conditions in two different species of right whale. So we have the North Atlantic right whale, which is up in our hemisphere, and then we have the southern right whale, which is in the southern hemisphere. And even though they're both right whales, they're still two different species. So they wanted to look at how the body condition might be different. And so they took drones and they flew them overhead, and they took measurements of the body length and the body width, and they calculated the body condition. And what they found is that the North Atlantic right whales were in much poorer condition than the southern counterparts. And so they found that all adult right whales, including moms and also juveniles, were just in overall bad shape. And they were also a lot shorter than the southern right whales. And so this is really important because if you're in poor condition, this can affect your growth, your survival. It affects how frequently you can reproduce and at what age you can reproduce. And this is all things that we need to consider when we think about the recovery of a species or the ability of a species to recover. So this was actually a really, really important piece of information for right whale conservation. Now, the other really cool study is one that was done for fin whales. So when we think about fin whales and blue whales, for example, there's not a lot of reports of them getting entangled. So there's often the assumption that this is something that just doesn't really happen for whales. They don't get entangled in fishing gear. It's a really rare occurrence. And the way that we tell whether or not a whale has been previously entangled is through the scars that they have on their bodies. So in this case, they took a bunch of photos that were taken from ships of fin whales, and they looked at them, they looked at all the scars, and they calculated the percentage of how many whales had been entangled previously. But then they also wanted to compare those estimates to what we could get from aerial images. So they took drones and they flew them over fin whales and took these beautiful photos, as you can see here. And they looked at all of the different scars and calculated the same rates. So I'm not sure, I don't think you can see my cursor, but there is a whale in the left middle with a little 3 on it that has a little bit of a brown coloration to the body. That's an example of a whale that has most definitely been entangled previously. So they looked at all this and they compared it. And when they looked just at the pictures from the boats, it told them that only 6.5% of fin whales were entangled previously. And that's not a lot. 6.5 is not a big number. But when they looked at the aerial photos of fin whales, that jumped up to 44 to 55%. So suddenly you've gone from less than 10% to now half of all fin whales getting entangled. So that's a huge difference. So why is that the case? Well, the big reason for that is that fin whales are a species that don't show their tail when they dive. So if we think in contrast, humpback whales, if any of you have ever been whale watching or have just seen videos of humpbacks, you know that when they dive, they show their tail in the air. So it's completely exposed and you can see that whole surface. And fin whales don't really do that. So when you take photos of them from boats, you can't always get a very clear shot of their back tail and of the tailstock. And that's something that we call the caudal peduncle. So that's what I've circled here in the circle. So this area is where we see the vast majority of entanglements. This is where they get entangled the most. And so this is where we really need to focus if we want to get a good idea of whether or not they've been entangled. And what's really interesting is when they looked at all of the vessel photos, not just for fin whales, but also blues and humpbacks, they found that the more that this area was exposed in the photos, so the better that they could see this area, the higher those rates went up. So when they recalculated, they saw that entanglement rates were as high as 60% for blues, 80% for fins, and 86% for humpbacks. So those are huge, huge, huge numbers. So the major takeaways that we got from this were firstly that for species that don't really show their tail a lot, aerial imagery is better. It's just the better way for us to assess whether or not they've been entangled. It's not always very clear from the boats. And then the other major one is that these whales are getting entangled a lot more frequently than we once thought. And that's really important because if we don't think that something is an issue, we might not research it, or we might not feel the need to research it. But knowing that these whales do get entangled and they get entangled a lot means that we can focus on them and try to figure out what effects this might be having on them. So those are just 2 examples of just the kinds of really cool discoveries that drones can make. Now, another technology is thermal imaging. And this is actually something that I knew very little about up until very recently. So this has been used for a few decades now to detect marine mammals at night. So it uses the whale blow, which is very, very warm compared to the cold ocean. And it can also detect whale breaches and flipper slaps, so anything where they're moving a lot of water. And it can do so from many kilometers away. So this photo here on the right, this is showing a time lapse of a whale blow being detected by this thermal camera. And this is currently being tested as an automated detection method for whale monitoring and to actually prevent ship strikes. So vessels are trying to use this to look out for whales and make sure that they can correct their course or slow down to prevent whales from getting hit. So this is a very active area of research right now. And I also wanted to highlight some work being done by a researcher that I have the great pleasure of knowing personally. This is Gina Lenati, and she's a PhD student at the University of New Brunswick. And she's using a combination of drones and thermal cameras to look at whale health. So she's using a drone with a high resolution camera and a thermal camera to measure the temperature of blowholes and to look at their body condition. And both of these are indicators of whale health. So from the temperature of the blowhole, we can estimate their internal body temperature, and we can find out whether or not they're sick. So she's collected data on right, humpback, minke, and fin whales, although she's focusing specifically on right whales, and she wants to know how right whale body temperature and ultimately their health changes. And so just to give you an idea of what this looks like, this is a humpback whale. And the top photo is the photo taken from the high-res camera. And then the bottom photo is what's picked up by the thermal camera. So in this case, the whiter it is, the hotter it is. So you can see that the blowholes are open and very, very, very hot. And there's also some other patches of warmth lower down on the body. And she's actually still trying to figure out what those patches of heat are. But this is just a very cool application, and it's going to be able to tell us so much about right whale health. I'm also going to briefly talk about biologging and telemetry. So this is the use of tags, so physical tags in the animals to collect data about them and their surrounding environment. And this has been used for a very, very long time for a number of different reasons. First off, we can use it to collect information about their environments. We can figure out what kind of habitats these whales are in, what's the depth, what's the temperature. We can also look at dive behavior, so how deep they're diving, how often, how frequently, all of that we can figure out through these tags. We can tag specific whales and actually follow their movements and see where they're going. We can identify common areas like feeding grounds. And we can also look at their behavior, so how they respond to sound and how they allocate their time doing different activities, and also how they interact with humans. So one example is a study that used tags to follow a bunch of whales and then see how those movements overlapped with shipping lanes. And that's, of course, super important to look at. One other thing that I wanted to mention is a technology that's not necessarily used for detection and conservation directly, but it's something that can be used for education. So Ocean School is an educational platform that uses a bunch of different technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality and 360-degree experiences to teach people about the ocean, about whales, and how everything is connected with each other. So one really cool example is this activity called Where's Waldo, where you have an augmented reality whale that's true to size, so it's as big as it should be, and you can actually examine that whale, you can do measurements, you can do all kinds of things. So I just wanted to put this in here just to show that ocean tech can be used for so much more than just direct science. You can use it to educate and inspire young people to become ocean enthusiasts as well. So there's a lot of possibilities with ocean tech. So now I'm going to get into the technologies that I'm specifically using for my PhD. One of them is satellite technology. So this has actually been used for a variety of animals so far, and I didn't even realize this at first, but it's been used for polar bears, seals, penguins, birds, elephants, you name it. So it's been mostly used in polar regions or areas that are very difficult to access. And it's really good for those kinds of areas because it allows for the long-term monitoring of a population with no impact to the environment and to the study animals themselves. And it also means that you don't have to actually physically go out to these places to get the data. Now, this hasn't really been used for whales a lot so far, but there are a few cool examples that I want to show you. So this is the study that I consider to be kind of the key whales from space satellite paper. So this is the paper that actually inspired me for my PhD. And this study looked at 4 different species of whale in 4 different places. And you can see that we can see them really clearly, which is surprising. So we can see their body shapes and their flukes and their flippers. And so this was really the proof that, yes, this is something that can be done. So this was really cool. And then the other really neat thing is these same researchers also use satellite imagery to look for whale carcasses. And so the context for this is that in 2015, there was this huge mass mortality event of sei whales, and it was over 300 whales that died due to an algal toxic bloom. And so of course you can imagine it's quite a task to then go out and try to find all of these whales and count them and do what you need to do. And so they wanted to see if satellite imagery could pick up all of these carcasses and see how well it did compared to surveys. So they collected this imagery right after the event, but before any surveys could take place. And they actually found more whale carcasses than all of the boat and plane surveys that they did. So they found way more. And so this was really, really important because, for example, with right whales, we know that the carcasses we find are a very small proportion of the whales that actually die. So if we're able to find more of these, we can get a better sense of how many are dying and what the populations look like, but also get people to go out and collect those carcasses and get more information about why those whales died. And so this is just another really cool application of this technology. And so the final piece of technology that I want to bring up is automation techniques. So this is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we've made advances in this that allow us to now detect animals on land and at sea. We can distinguish between species and also between individuals. And if we can automate wildlife detection, it means that we can more quickly and efficiently get data, really, really valuable data like population estimates. Now, this is all something that's been done for whales, but not very frequently. So there's only been a handful of people who have actually started to look at this, but it's something that's very quickly becoming more and more popular. So I just want to show you a quick example. This is some researchers who built some machine learning algorithms to automatically detect and identify whales in aerial imagery. So at the top we have a minke whale, and at the bottom we have some humpbacks, and the algorithm was able to pick up on those and tell what species it was. And it was also able to take measurements, body measurements automatically, all with a very high level of accuracy. So it just goes to show that this is an incredibly powerful technology, and it could really do wonders for whale research. And so now all of that brings me to my own PhD research, which I'm sure you're curious about. So as I mentioned, back when I was first deciding what to do with my PhD, I stumbled across that Whales from Space paper and other headlines like whales spotted from space and scientists count whales from space. And I just thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could apply this technology to all of the whales that we have here on our coast? And then I stumbled across headlines about North Atlantic right whales. And at the time, I had no idea that these whales even existed. I didn't know that this was a species. I knew nothing about them. But as I started to do more research, I realized that this was the perfect application for this kind of technology. So I'm just going to give you a brief idea of what's happening with right whales right now. So this is a critically endangered species, and you can only find it in North America. It's estimated that as of the end of 2019, there's only 356 of these whales left. So there's really not a lot of them. And also, as you can see from this figure here, this is a species that has suffered a lot of mortality. So since 2017, 34 whales have died in Canada and the US, and 15 have been documented with serious injuries due to entanglement in fishing gear and vessel strikes. And so altogether, we've lost over 10% of the population in 5 years. And the other major challenge is that even though we've been studying these whales for very close to 5 decades now, we still don't know a lot about where these whales are and where they go. They have a very large habitat range. As you can see here, they span all the way from Florida up in the way to our waters here. But for any given year, we don't see over half of the population. It's like half of the population just disappears, and we have no idea where they are. And so we don't know how they're getting from place to place. We don't know the movements that specific whales are taking. And so it's very difficult to protect something if you don't actually know where it is. So it's been very difficult to try to detect them and to try to keep an eye on them. And so that's why we were wondering if satellite technology and automation technologies could be used to keep a better eye on them, figure out what they are, and also to better manage them. So for my specific research, what we're trying to do is develop an automated survey method that uses machine learning to detect, identify, and count whales in both aerial and satellite imagery. And we want to apply this method to the Atlantic Northeast, so the waters around here, to investigate whale abundance and distribution and how that may overlap with our human activities, so shipping and fishing, for example. So up until this point, I've been working primarily with aerial imagery, so images from planes and from drones. And although we're looking mainly for whales, we actually do see a lot of other animals. So we just wanted to give you a few examples of what this imagery actually looks like. So the first thing that we see are actually dolphins, dolphins and porpoises. This is the animal that we see the most often in these images. And we see them either individually or with moms and babies, or sometimes even in really, really large groups of 50 plus animals. So it's really amazing to see. We also see seals. We can see sharks. So this is a basking shark, but we also see other species. And we also see turtles, leatherback turtles. And plus, if any of you are familiar with the sunfish or the mola mola, we see that one too. And then, of course, we do see lots of whales. And the species we see the most often are the minkies. And this is personally one of my favorite whales. I just think they're super cute. We also see fin whales. And we see our beautiful right whales, of course. And we also see some humpbacks. Although what's really interesting about the humpbacks is we haven't seen a lot of them. We've only seen about 2 in all of the imagery that we've looked at, even though this is the species that they see the most often when they do their plane surveys. So we're not actually sure why the humpback whales are not showing up, but I'm hoping to find more soon. And so what we're doing is we're taking all of these pictures of whales and we're putting them together in this training data set that's going to be used to make 2 different machine learning algorithms. So we're going to have one that works just with plane and drone images, and we're going to have another one that works with satellite images. Now, the major challenge with satellite images right now is that there aren't a lot of them over open ocean, especially in places where we know that whales are. And so to try to fix that or try to combat that, we're going to apply a specific technique called downsampling. What that is it takes these beautiful high resolution photos like what you're seeing here, and we kind of downgrade the resolution down to what we would expect from a satellite image. So we take images like this and we transform them into something that looks more like this. And again, the reason we're doing that is just to try to combat this data gap, just because whenever you do anything with automation and machine learning, you need many, many thousands of examples of what it is you want to find. And so we're ultimately just trying to make sure that our algorithm is as successful as it can be once it actually starts looking at satellite imagery, which will be very soon. And so I'm working on all of this right now. This has been something I've been working on for the past couple of years, but we're also really excited to announce that we're going to be using this technology for a specific program. So we're going to use all of these techniques for something called smart whales. So this is a brand new project that was launched by the Canadian Space Agency and the Canadian government, and it's trying to develop space-based solutions that will enhance our ability to detect and monitor right whales in Canada. And so over the next 2 years, we're going to be developing a right whale monitoring and vessel strike mitigation tool that uses artificial intelligence. So it's going to be able to look at a satellite image and be able to find right whales in it. And then it will be able to communicate that along with other information to the people that make decisions about what to do in near real time. And it's also going to allow us to just get a better understanding of what right whales are doing in Canadian waters, just because we know so little. So this is all something that's a work in progress. And so I'm hoping that I'll have more to show all of you very, very soon about what we can do with satellite technology and whales. So just to conclude, I know I've been talking for a long time, so thank you so much for listening. I know some other speakers have started to give you guys some advice about careers in ocean tech and what to do. So I just want to offer my own advice to you. And first is that ocean tech is a really huge field. It's rapidly expanding and evolving. Even if whales aren't your thing, you can apply ocean tech to so many different animals and just so many different cases that relate to the environment. So there's a lot of potential there. And I also want to echo some previous advice in that it's really important to get involved early. So to get talking with people early. If you're planning on going to university, talk to the people who are giving you your lectures. Talk to them, see what kind of research they do, see what kind of work they've done and how they've got to where they are. And also start volunteering in labs. I can't stress enough how important it is to start volunteering with labs. Even if it's not something you're interested in or something you'll ever think you'll be doing later, it's all useful. You're just going to develop skills that'll be applicable to everything you do later on. So get involved. And also I want to say that no idea is too crazy. When I first pitched this whales from space idea, there were so many people that told me that it just wasn't possible. It was just something that, could happen maybe later, but just not, it wasn't realistic. And now here we are 2 years later, and it looks like everyone is talking about whales from space. So if you have ideas, pursue them, talk to people, don't give up, just keep talking, and you can make it a reality. And I also want to say too that there are probably some of you that might know exactly what you want to do and exactly what career path you want to take. But there also may be others that don't know what you're passionate about yet and don't know what you want to do. And I just want to say that that's okay. It's okay for you to take your time to figure out what you want to do. There's no rush. There's no need to commit to something just to say that, you're doing something with your life. Take the time that you need to find something that you're really passionate about. And I also just want to say that keep moving forward. Whether you go into science or industry or whatever you do, or even if it's just life, it's often difficult, it's often frustrating, but just keep moving forward. Keep your head up and keep working. There's a phrase that I really like, which is your efforts will never betray you. And that's kind of my main takeaway is that, whatever you do, any effort that you put in, it's never going to betray you. So just keep moving forward, keep learning, keep discovering, and you will find what it is you're passionate about. And if that's ocean tech, then that's all the better. We'll be happy to have you in our community. So that's it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. This is also my email address. You can contact me about anything you want, or if you have other questions, I'd be happy to chat to all of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Olivia. That was an amazing presentation and also really great advice that I'm sure a lot of our participants really, take to heart, and I hope they take that with them as well. Does anyone have any questions for Olivia? We have plenty of time to do some Q&A, so feel free to ask in the chat, and I can, of course, moderate that for you. So yeah, feel free to take that chance there, and if anyone else wants to chime in, now's your chance. All right, we do have a question. So aside from satellites, what other methods are used to monitor the open ocean, and how effective are they?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So there are some other technologies, things like sonar and radar, for example. There's a couple of those. We also use models as well to kind of see. So there's not a lot really is kind of the gist of that. I mean, in terms of open ocean exploration, it's been very much limited to more coastal waters. So things that are very, very close to land, even satellite imagery, there's not a lot that actively looks at the open ocean, just because there hasn't been a lot of interest in that. There's not a lot of people that have been specifically requesting for imagery or for active monitoring of the open ocean. This is something that's now changing, of course. So satellite companies are now kind of slowly getting on board with this idea that people are interested and they want to look at it. So my answer to that is there's really not a lot. Everything that we have is very limited to coastal waters.
And is there a big data gap then?
There is, absolutely. Yeah, there's absolutely a massive data gap. Even like I said, just for the area that I'm interested in. So that's mainly the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And if you look at that, we have a general sense of where these whales are. And if you look at where satellites have surveyed so far, it's really not in these areas. It's, there's these big chunks of, not even open ocean, but just open that's just a little bit farther away from land masses. That's just completely not surveyed. So there is a big data gap right now, and that's part of why there's been some hesitancy to use satellite imagery for whales, just because people think that there's not enough coverage, and that is true in some cases. But we also know that this is very quickly changing. There's a lot of interest in whales from space or just wildlife detection from space, and so they're actively now trying to task these areas more frequently.
Okay, thank you for answering that.
So I have a question. I know that you talked about how you're passionate, but why did you choose an ocean tech career?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, I mean, in terms from the whale side, like I mentioned, that was just always a passion of mine ever since I was younger. But I think in terms of the tech, that only really came from my time at Apple. Like I said, before Apple, I didn't really have a huge interest in tech. I didn't know a lot about it. But I worked for that company for 6 years, and you learn a lot about technology itself, but also just about what technology can do for people in so many different situations. And I think the real kind of turning point for me was there was a class I took in my last year of undergrad, and it was actually with my current supervisor, who's Boris Worm at Dal. And it was just a conservation biology class, and I had to do a project. And at the time, I just decided to do a project on how technology had an impact on biology research. And as I prepared for that assignment, it was sort of this eureka moment of just, wow, technology can really do a lot for biology. I just thought that they were just so disjointed, that technology had nothing to do with biology. There was no way that you could ever marry the two. And then I just realized how wrong I was. So I remember actually sitting down, and part of our assignment is we had to write like a pledge that we wanted to make for ourselves. And my pledge to myself was that I wanted to do something that combined biology and technology. I wanted to be able to show people that these are not two different fields, that you can combine them and you can do really amazing things with them, not just from the scientific side, but also to educate and communicate and get people interested and engaged with the ocean.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat.
All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, I'm just going to maybe wrap it up here then. We wanted to thank each of you for participating in the Ocean Tech program. Super awesome. And thank you so much, Olivia. It was a super great presentation, very involved with some great advice at the end. It's super exciting to see how many young women are interested across the province in learning more about ocean tech and the opportunities that we have and that are waiting for you guys after graduation. So like Kia had said, this was our final speaker series of the Ocean Tech program, but there's one last event and you will not want to miss it. It's super fun. It's this Saturday at 1 p.m. We're going to be analyzing ROV, so remotely operated vehicle footage, and interpreting the data. So we have the instructors Kira and Hannah joining us from Supernova, and it's going to be a really fun workshop. We wouldn't be able to run the program without all of the amazing support of our partners and funders, speakers and participants, and the awesome crew that we have organizing this whole program. And finally, we're doing the draw for our 3 iPads on Saturday, and then we're going to be getting in touch. So if this is your first time joining, every session that you attend gets you a ballot for a chance to win an iPad. So on that note, thank you all so much for joining us today, and we can't wait to see you on Saturday.
Thank you
guys.
Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Olivia.
Thanks.